What exactly is the job description for a presidential aide? Is it managing a calendar, preparing briefing materials, coordinating travel, handling calls from chiefs of staff, cabinet officials, lawmakers, foreign leaders? Or is it spreading across a Scottish golf course like a distressed Victorian governess because there are no more cards? Then writing a multi-paragraph letter to the President of the United States apologizing for the possibility that you may have embarrassed him by using your own legs. Because that's where we are. Natalie Harp, one of Donald Trump's closest aides, reportedly wrote him a letter after a 2023 Scotland trip that reads less like a workplace correspondence and more like a lost chapter from a gothic romance novel called The Duke of Mar-a-Lago and the Girl Who Feared She Had Displeased Him. The letter is extraordinary, not because it's sentimental, although it certainly is that. It's extraordinary because it shows what can happen when ordinary professional boundaries are replaced with personal devotion, emotional dependency, and the constant terror of falling lowered in the eyes of the most powerful man in the country. And that would be weird enough if Harp were merely an enthusiastic supporter. But she is not merely a supporter. She has reportedly been one of Trump's closest gatekeepers, a woman colleagues have called the human printer, carrying around a portable printer so she can place favorable stories, polls, and carefully selected information directly into his hands. So tonight I want to look at that letter, not as tabloid gossip, but as evidence of the court culture surrounding Donald Trump. Because when aides call the president her guardian and protector in this life, we are far beyond the normal political species known as the suck-up. We have entered feudalism with Wi-Fi. The letter begins with a scene that should have been simple. Natalie Harp was in Scotland during a Trump golf trip. She was apparently left behind after Margot Martin's car pulled away. She was without her passport. She says she panicked and instead of calling the Secret Service, the federal agency charged with protecting the president and managing this exact kind of presidential travel chaos, she called Donald Trump, not the Secret Service, not the travel coordinator, not the senior staffer, not the person in charge of passports, logistics, or the very reasonable question, why has someone been left in a foreign country without identification? She called Trump. In the letter, Harp says that she could have just called the Secret Service instead of you. That one sentence tells us more than pages of official biographies ever could. It suggests that, in the moment of panic, the normal chain of command had evaporated. Trump was not simply her boss, he had become her emergency contact. He was the person she believed would rescue her. That's not a conventional employment relationship. That is the emotional architecture of a royal court. The ruler at the center, the loyal retainer constantly worrying whether she has failed him, and the rest of the institution reorganized around access to one man's moods. Harp's letter was reportedly among several she wrote to Trump in 2023. The New York Times reported that people around Trump had grown concerned about the intensity of the letters containing lines such as, "You are all that matters to me," and "I don't ever want to let you down." The letter, shown in the image attached to this episode, includes another variation of that same theme. Her fear that she has disappointed him. Her insistence that all she wants is to bring him joy, that she will return a better person. That's worth sitting with. Return a better person. Again, this is not an employee writing a professional apology after mishandling a briefing packet. This is not, "I'm sorry for the logistical breakdown, here's what happened, here's how I will prevent it next time." That would have been normal. Instead, we get a confession of spiritual failure, a declaration of devotion, a promise of moral self-improvement. The energy is not, "I made a work mistake." The energy is, "My lord, I have dishonored the estate." And the estate, in this case, appears to be a golf course in Scotland. Now, Harp's devotion has a personal history. She's publicly credited Trump's 2018 Right to Try Act with saving her life after a cancer diagnosis. Her story became central to Trump's messaging. She spoke at the 2020 Republican National Convention and said that without Trump, she would have died waiting for treatment. But there is an important complication. The Washington Post reviewed Harp's own public descriptions of her treatment and reported that the drug she received was already FDA approved for another use, what medicine calls off-label treatment. Medical experts told the Post that such treatment would not have qualified under the federal right to try law, which governs access to certain unapproved investigational drugs. The Post also noted that Harp had publicly discussed her treatment before Trump signed the law. That does not minimize her illness. It doesn't minimize the fear, the pain, or the gratitude of someone who believes a political figure helped change the circumstances of her life. But it does matter because it helps explain the emotional fuel behind this relationship and raises questions about whether a political narrative was transformed into a personal debt so profound that the boundary between gratitude and subservience disappeared. Now let's get more into the Scotland golf course episode because it is absurd on its face. In her letter, Harp explains that she walked the course because there were no carts and because she wanted to avoid using yet another cart. She says she did not want to spare the course any more carts. She tried to find the person whose name she had forgotten, asked whether she could continue walking, and tried to determine whether anybody else would need a cart. This is the kind of logistical problem that normally produces a text message. Maybe an email, maybe a brief, unpleasant call to whoever forgot to arrange transport. But Harp treats it as if she has accidentally trampled on the royal tulips in front of the Windsor Castle. I am also sorry if I was an embarrassment walking the course in Scotland, she writes. An embarrassment for walking on a golf course in Scotland. This is a country with hills, rain, sheep, castles, and enough walking history to sustain an entire tourism industry. But in the Trump orbit, walking has apparently become an act requiring contrition. And it's not funny because Harp had to walk. People walk, presidents walk, aides walk. The problem is that the letter presents this minor inconvenience as a possible stain on Trump's honor. The court must remain immaculate. The king must never see a staffer without a cart. The grass must be spared, the carts must be rationed, the aide must fear that she has committed a crime against optics by having knees. Then there's the Margot Martin reference. Harp says Margot's cart pulled away, leaving her behind. That detail is almost hilariously specific. It turns a routine staff mishap into a palace intrigue. The carriage has departed. The court favorite is gone. One lady remains stranded behind customs, passportless, fearful, and apparently unable to call any government security official without first dialing the sovereign. Margot Martin is not just some random name in this drama. She has been a visible Trump aide and communications figure in his political operation. Her inclusion in the letter gives the entire passage this weird flavor of social hierarchy. People competing for closeness, visibility, and the approval of the one person who matters most. And that's exactly why this deserves scrutiny. These arrangements are not harmless just because they are strange. In any presidential administration, access is power. The person who gets paper in front of the president has power. The person who decides which flattering clips he sees has power. The person who receives dictated posts, types them, and presses send has power. The person who travels near him, remains near him, and becomes emotionally indispensable has power. Harp's official title has been reported as Special Assistant to the President and Executive Assistant to the President. Time reported that she has played a direct role in managing Trump's social media, including typing and posting dictated messages. Colleagues have reportedly dubbed her the human printer because she carries around a portable printer to provide Trump with physical copies of information as his day moves on. Think about that nickname for a moment. The human printer. It sounds silly. It sounds like something you would say about the person at work who knows where the toner is. But in Trump's world, it may describe a serious information pipeline. A portable printer means portable curation. It means favorable headlines can become paper. Whole numbers can become paper. Compliments can become paper. Anger can become paper. Suspicion can become paper. And paper when it's handed directly to a president, can become policy, a post, a grudge, a firing, a phone call, or a national distraction. That's the actual issue lurking behind the comedy of this letter. It's not that Natalie Harp writes emotionally intense notes. Adults can write whatever letters they choose. The concern is that a person reportedly offering this level of personal devotion also occupies a position of extreme proximity and influence. When the emotional posture is, I never want to bring you anything but joy, what happens to the bad news? What happens to the facts that may upset him? What happens to the intelligence that complicates the flattering story? What happens to the staff who say no? A president needs aides who can deliver unwelcome information. A president needs people who can say, this is not going to work, that's illegal, that briefing is incomplete, or you are being misled. A president doesn't need a court that sees its primary purpose as emotional climate control. But that brings us to the most revealing passage in Harp's letter. She writes that she sees herself being lowered in your eyes and good opinion, and says that this is the fear she sees because she never wants to bring him anything but joy. That is not professional language. It's not even particularly modern language. It's the language of a Victorian diary. It is a person worrying that she has fallen from the good opinion of the Lord of the Manor. It's Downton Abbey with executive orders. It's Jane Austen, except Mr. Darcy has a private jet and the estate newsletter is Truth Social. And then comes the title, Guardian and Protector in This Life. Harp explicitly invokes Trump, not merely as a political leader, not merely as a boss, but as a guardian and protector. Her personal history makes the phrase more understandable, but it also makes it more troubling. If she genuinely sees him as the person who saved her life, then Trump is not just a central figure in her career. He becomes the central figure in her personal mythology. That kind of devotion can feel sincere. It can also create a profound conflict of interest when the object of devotion is the president. Because the president does not need worship. The president needs resistance when resistance is warranted. He needs advice that is honest even when it is unpleasant. He needs staff whose livelihoods and identities do not depend on keeping him pleased. And the letter suggests the exact opposite. A person who fears lowering herself in his eyes apologizes for walking on a golf course and says she has forgotten to eat and sleep because she is so consumed by work and by the fear of disappointing him. That's not a healthy professional culture. It's a warning light. Then we arrive at the ending, the cash register mementos. Harp thanks Trump for buying items for her at a cash register and calls them mementos of this trip of a lifetime, a coming of age. A coming of age at 30-something years old, at a golf course gift shop, with the President of the United States. That might be the most revealing phrase in the whole letter, because a coming of age story is supposed to be about becoming independent. It's supposed to be about learning judgment, developing confidence, and becoming your own person. But this coming of age seems to be defined by the opposite, becoming ever more emotionally fused to the patron figure who provides protection, approval, souvenirs, and a place at court. The cash register becomes a ceremonial altar. The souvenirs become relics. The golf trip becomes a life-changing rite of passage. And the president becomes not merely a supervisor, but a guardian whose approval establishes emotional worth. Now, defenders of Harp describe her as loyal, hardworking, and deeply committed to the president and the country. Her family and allies have also pushed back on insinuations about the relationship, emphasizing her serious illness, her work ethic, and her long-standing political loyalty. Those defenses deserve to be acknowledged. No one should reduce a woman's career to gossip. No one should treat her as a cartoon, and no one should make claims that are not supported by evidence. So the question is not whether Harp deserves to be mocked for working hard. The question is what happens when political power becomes so personalized that the administration begins to look less like government and more like an emotional support system for one man. I want to be clear about what this story is and what it is not. It's not proof of a romantic relationship. The public reporting does not establish that. It's not a reason to mock a cancer survivor for having gratitude, trauma, or a complicated personal history. It's not even an indictment of every loyal aide who works closely with a president. And it's not an invitation to recycle the oldest and most sensational White House templates. Bill Clinton's relationship with Monica Lewinsky was an acknowledged inappropriate sexual relationship involving a president and a White House intern. An episode that became a national scandal, a formal investigation, and an impeachment crisis. The stories surrounding John F. Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe, meanwhile, have been repeated for decades, but public accounts are filled with contested claims, secondhand testimony, and far more mythology than conclusive documentation. So I'm not saying Natalie Harp is Monica Lewinsky. I'm not saying Donald Trump is Bill Clinton. And I'm certainly not presenting the highly mythologized Kennedy-Monroe story as some proven historical blueprint. The point is more basic, and, in my view, more alarming. You don't need a proven sexual relationship for a workplace dynamic to be inappropriate, unhealthy, or dangerous to the public interest. A relationship can cross professional boundaries through emotional dependency, unequal power, access, fear of displeasing the boss, and a culture that asks staff to manage one man's feelings as if those feelings are a matter of state. Presidents rely on loyalty. Every White House does. But loyalty is supposed to exist alongside institutions. It's supposed to be checked by process, law, security standards, and the basic expectation that staff are serving the public, not merely protecting the feelings of the person in charge. Loyalty is not supposed to look like an aide treating a missed golf cart as a moral transgression. It's not supposed to require a subordinate to feel she has fallen in the president's good opinion. It's not supposed to turn a boss into a guardian and protector in this life. And it's definitely not supposed to mean that the person with direct access to the president becomes so emotionally invested in his approval that delivering bad news begins to feel like betrayal. That's the difference between loyalty and devotion. Loyalty is showing up, doing difficult work, telling the truth, following the law, and placing the country above the leader. Devotion is seeing the leader as a source of protection, purpose, validation, and personal redemption. Those are not the same thing. And in a presidential administration, confusing them can be dangerous. That's why the Natalie Harp letter matters. It offers a rare, unfiltered look at the emotional grammar of power around Trump. It portrays an aide who is not just simply trying to do her job well. She is trying to remain worthy in the eyes of the leader she calls her protector. She is apologizing for a golf course walk as though it were a moral failure. She's promising to do better. She's describing a cash register interaction as a coming-of-age event. She signs off with all my heart. And outside the letter, she is reportedly positioned at the center of Trump's information ecosystem, carrying the printer, handing him materials, transmitting his messages, and operating as a gatekeeper. Those two realities cannot be separated. Personal devotion is not merely unusual. It's relevant because it exists beside access. A staffer who is afraid of displeasing a president may become less likely to challenge him. A staffer whose purpose is to bring joy may become more likely to filter out what causes discomfort. A staffer who regards the president as a guardian and a protector may not see herself as accountable to the public in the same way she sees herself accountable to him. That is how courts work. And courts have a predictable problem. Everyone is competing to be the last person in the ruler's ear. Everyone learns the ruler's emotional weather. Everyone adapts. Everyone becomes invested in telling the sovereign that the sun is shining even when the castle is already on fire. That may be entertaining in a costume drama. It's considerably less entertaining when the ruler has access to nuclear weapons, intelligence briefing, the Department of Justice, and the ability to shape lives of millions of people. The letter is funny because it is so dramatically overripe. It's funny because the Scottish golf cart crisis sounds like a rejected subplot from an episode of The Crown written by someone who had only seen the show through social media clips. It's funny because mementos of this trip of a lifetime, a coming of age, sounds like the inscription on a souvenir mug purchased after an emotionally significant afternoon near the ninth hole. But underneath the comedy is something darker. When a political system rewards personal adoration over independent judgment, it does not just become embarrassing. It becomes vulnerable. It becomes easier to manipulate. It becomes less capable of hearing the truth. And it becomes increasingly difficult to tell where public service ends and private emotional maintenance begins. Most bosses give you a 401k and an annual review. Trump gives you a portable printer, a golf cart apology, and a psychological hold so deep you'll end a memo with all my heart. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Kyle Fields. Until next time, stay safe out there, folks.